The last confirmed sighting of District Attorney Thomas Hale happened on a quiet Tuesday evening in late October 2005, in a part of Pennsylvania where nothing ever truly disappeared. At least, that's what people believed. The courthouse lights had gone dark one by one, janitors locking doors, security cameras blinking red in empty hallways, and the parking lot slowly emptying as staff drove home to dinners and televisions and ordinary lives. Thomas Hale was supposed to be one of them. Instead, he became the reason this town would never sleep the same way again. Hale was not just any prosecutor. He was meticulous, aggressive in court, and deeply unpopular among certain circles. Drug traffickers feared him. Corrupt contractors hated him. Defense attorneys respected him but never trusted him. And inside the courthouse, whispers followed him wherever he went. Some said he was preparing something big. Others believed he had already crossed a line that could not be uncrossed. At 6:42 p.m., Hale exited the rear entrance of the county courthouse, carrying a slim leather briefcase under his arm. Surveillance footage later reviewed showed nothing unusual. No one followed him. No confrontation. No visible tension. Just a man walking toward his car, a dark blue sedan parked beneath a flickering street lamp. He unlocked the door, placed the briefcase inside, and sat behind the wheel. That is where certainty ends. His car was found the next morning, parked neatly along a residential street less than 3 miles from his home. The engine was cold. The keys were still in the ignition. The briefcase was gone. There were no signs of a struggle. No blood. No broken glass. No fingerprints beyond Hale's own. It was as if the man had simply stepped out of his life and vanished into the night. When police knocked on the front door of the Hale residence just after 7 a.m., his wife already knew something was wrong. Thomas never missed breakfast. Never missed a court appearance. Never left without calling. And yet his phone went straight to voicemail, and his calendar showed no meetings beyond the courthouse. Within hours, the case drew attention far beyond the county line. A sitting district attorney did not simply disappear. Not in Pennsylvania. Not in 2005. Not without a reason. Search teams flooded the area. K-9 units traced Hale's scent from the parked vehicle to the edge of the sidewalk, and then nothing. The trail ended abruptly, as if he had entered another vehicle. Investigators canvassed nearby homes. No one reported hearing screams. No one saw a struggle. One neighbor recalled a car driving past slowly around 7 p.m., but could not describe the driver. Another mentioned headlights lingering too long at the corner, but dismissed it at the time. Inside Hale's office, detectives found something unsettling. His computer files had been accessed late the previous night, long after he was last seen. Several case folders were missing. Not random ones. Specific prosecutions. Sensitive ones. Files involving financial crimes, organized networks, and sealed indictments that had not yet been made public. The official statement released to the media urged calm. Authorities suggested Hale may have gone into hiding for personal reasons. Stress. Burnout. Family pressure. But behind closed doors, investigators were already treating it as something far darker. Because Thomas Hale had enemies. One name surfaced repeatedly during the first week of the investigation. A construction magnate with deep political ties, previously charged but never convicted in a massive bribery scheme. Hale had reopened the case quietly just months earlier. Subpoenas were drafted. Witnesses were being approached. And then, suddenly, the man leading the charge vanished. Another thread led toward a regional drug syndicate Hale had publicly vowed to dismantle. Confidential informants later admitted Hale had refused protection offers. He believed in the system. Believed the law would shield him. But laws do not stop shadows. As days turned into weeks, the tone of the investigation shifted. The FBI joined the search. Phone records were analyzed. Financial accounts examined. Hale's credit cards showed no activity after the night he disappeared. His passport remained at home. There was no evidence of preparation for escape. Then came the first anonymous tip. A call placed from a payphone nearly 50 miles away claimed Hale had been taken because he knew too much. The caller hung up before providing details. The call could not be traced. It fueled public panic and media frenzy. Was this a kidnapping? A warning? Or a deliberate misdirection? At Hale's home, his wife found something she had missed before. A handwritten note tucked into the back of his desk drawer. Just 4 words, written in block letters. If anything happens. The sentence was never finished. 4 years, the case would stall. Leads dried up. Witnesses recanted. Evidence went missing. Officially, Thomas Hale was declared missing, presumed dead. Unofficially, many believed the truth was buried deeper than anyone was willing to dig. Until now. Because in 2024, nearly 2 decades later, a sealed box was pulled from an evidence archive scheduled for destruction. Inside were documents that had never been logged. Phone intercept summaries. A partial audio recording. And a name that had never appeared in the public investigation. A name tied to power, protection, and silence. And suddenly, the question was no longer what happened to Thomas Hale. The question became who made sure we never found out. The sealed box should never have existed. According to official records, every piece of evidence tied to the disappearance of Thomas Hale had been catalogued, reviewed, and archived years earlier. Yet this box was different. No barcode. No chain of custody label. Just a handwritten date on the lid and a case number that did not match any public file. When the archivist opened it, she immediately knew this was something that had been hidden on purpose. Inside were transcripts of wiretaps authorized in 2005 under a separate corruption investigation, one that had been quietly shut down without explanation. The name Thomas Hale appeared repeatedly, not as a suspect, but as a target of concern. The recording suggested Hale had uncovered a network far larger than a single criminal enterprise. A network that reached into political offices, law enforcement agencies, and private businesses that funded local campaigns. One audio fragment stood out. The quality was poor, distorted by static, but Hale's voice was unmistakable. He sounded tired, frustrated, and afraid. He said he was being followed. He said he had been warned to stop digging. And he said something else that investigators in 2005 either ignored or buried. He said, "If I disappear, it won't be random." That statement alone should have reignited the case years ago. Instead, it vanished along with him. As modern investigators replayed the audio, they noticed something chilling. Hale was not speaking to a superior or a colleague. He was speaking to someone outside the system. Someone he did not trust, but someone he believed might survive long enough to tell the truth. That person had a name. But the name had been redacted. The documents also revealed that Hale had requested a private meeting just 2 days before his disappearance. Not with the governor. Not with federal prosecutors. But with a mid-level official inside the state attorney general's office. The meeting never happened. It was cancelled without explanation. The official later claimed Hale never showed up. Surveillance logs now suggested that statement was false. Meanwhile, back in 2005, the public narrative had shifted quickly. Media outlets began portraying Hale as unstable. Anonymous sources described him as paranoid, obsessed, reckless. Stories appeared suggesting marital strain, emotional burnout, even the possibility of voluntary disappearance. These narratives were never supported by evidence, but they were effective. Public interest faded. What few people knew was that Hale's wife had refused to accept the official silence. Privately, she hired a retired investigator who worked the case for nearly a decade. His notes, later found among her belongings, painted a disturbing picture. He believed Hale had been removed deliberately, not killed immediately, but held long enough to extract information. Why hold him? Because Hale had already shared copies of sensitive documents with someone else. That someone else, investigators now believe, was the missing link. Financial records uncovered during the reopening showed unexplained withdrawals from shell companies connected to individuals Hale had prosecuted years earlier. These withdrawals coincided with the week of his disappearance. Large sums, moved quickly, routed through offshore accounts, then disappearing entirely. Someone paid for something. Or someone was paid to make something disappear. Then came the second tip. This one did not come anonymously. It came from a former corrections officer who waited nearly 20 years before speaking. He claimed that in November 2005, an unregistered detainee was held briefly in a private holding facility normally reserved for federal transfers. No name. No booking photo. Just a man described as middle-aged, well-dressed, and injured. The officer remembered him because the man asked one question repeatedly. "Does anyone know I'm here?" According to the officer, the man was gone within 48 hours. Removed by individuals who did not present standard credentials. The paperwork was retroactively altered. The footage was erased. But memories were not. When shown a photo of Thomas Hale years later, the officer went silent. Then he nodded. As this new evidence surfaced, pressure mounted on state officials to explain why these leads had never been pursued. Some claimed incompetence. Others claimed jurisdictional confusion. But a growing number of investigators began to believe the truth was far worse. The case had not failed. It had been stopped. Because reopening it now meant implicating people who were still alive. Still powerful. Still protected. And somewhere in all of this was the unanswered question that haunted everyone involved. If Thomas Hale knew he was about to disappear, why didn't he run? The answer, buried in one final document inside that box, suggested something heartbreaking. Hale believed the truth would protect him. He believed the system would hold. He believed wrong. The moment living suspects entered the frame, everything changed. What had once been treated as a historical disappearance was suddenly a present-day threat. Phones went quiet. Requests for interviews were declined. Emails went unanswered. And for the first time since 2005, attorneys representing state agencies began issuing formal denials before questions were even asked. That reaction alone told investigators they were close. The first living suspect was not a criminal in the traditional sense. He was a respected consultant, formerly attached to multiple prosecutorial reform initiatives across Pennsylvania. His name appeared in Hale's private notes more than any other. Not as an enemy. As an obstacle. Someone who had access to sensitive information without leaving fingerprints on any decision. When questioned informally, the consultant denied knowing Hale well. But archived calendar data contradicted him. Over a 6-month period in 2005, the two men met at least 11 times. None of those meetings appeared in official schedules. They took place in diners, parking garages, and once, inside a closed courthouse wing undergoing renovations. Investigators began to reconstruct what Hale had been building. He was not chasing a single corrupt official. He was mapping influence. Tracking how evidence vanished, how cases were reassigned, how internal complaints died before reaching daylight. Hale had noticed a pattern. Prosecutors who asked the wrong questions found themselves isolated, promoted sideways, or quietly removed. One internal memo, recovered from a corrupted hard drive, contained a sentence that chilled everyone who read it. This is not a bad actor problem. This is a design problem. Hale understood something fundamental. The system was not broken. It was engineered to protect itself. The second suspect emerged from financial analysis. A former campaign financier whose companies had donated heavily to both sides of local elections. His businesses had also employed private security contractors, some with backgrounds that did not survive scrutiny. Phone metadata placed him within a 5-mile radius of Hale's last known location the night he vanished. When confronted with this information, the financier invoked legal counsel immediately. But before doing so, he asked one question. Do you know how dangerous this is? Forensic advancements added another layer. Modern DNA testing was applied to an item long dismissed as irrelevant. Hale's abandoned vehicle had been processed in 2005, but only for basic fingerprints. A fabric fiber lodged beneath the driver's seat had never been analyzed. New testing revealed the fiber came from a restraint system not commercially available. The same type used by private detention contractors. That discovery aligned perfectly with the corrections officer's account. But the most unsettling breakthrough came from voice analysis. Investigators revisited the distorted wiretap recording. Using modern enhancement techniques, they isolated background noise. Not traffic. Not wind. Machinery. Industrial ventilation. The acoustic signature matched a limited number of facilities in the region. One of them was no longer operational. The building had been demolished in 2008. Its records were missing. As pressure intensified, one former official agreed to speak off the record. His voice trembled as he explained why no one intervened in 2005. Hale had crossed a line that could not be uncrossed. Not because he was wrong, but because he was right too soon. There are truths the system can absorb, the official said. And there are truths that destabilize it. Hale had uncovered one of the latter. The question now was not whether he had been silenced. It was whether he had survived long enough to leave something behind. And according to encrypted files recovered from a forgotten backup server, he had. A digital dead man's switch. Incomplete. Fragmented. But real. It contained references to evidence stored outside Pennsylvania. Evidence that could not be controlled by local power structures. Evidence meant to surface only if Hale failed to return. The switch never activated. Until now. As investigators decrypted the first file, they realized the case was no longer about one man's disappearance. It was about a decision made 2 decades earlier. A decision to protect power over justice. And someone, somewhere, knew exactly where Thomas Hale had been taken. Because they helped put him there. By mid-morning, news of the case reopening had leaked. Headlines across Pennsylvania began to shift tone, from curiosity to urgency. Social media channels buzzed with speculation, with retired detectives and legal analysts weighing in. But few understood the depth of the discoveries now emerging. Investigators returned to Hale's notes, each page now infused with the gravity of hindsight. Details once considered mundane, obscure references to meetings, marginal scribbles in calendars, now read like a map, a breadcrumb trail he had meticulously laid for anyone who could follow it. The deeper they went, the clearer it became that Hale had anticipated resistance. He had prepared for the very moment when his absence would have forced others to act. Among the most startling revelations were internal communications between high-ranking officials. Emails, long thought deleted, were recovered from redundant servers. The tone was candid, almost casual, betraying a shocking indifference, decisions made not for justice, but for image management. Names of subordinates who had been quietly sidelined appeared repeatedly, paired with instructions to let it ride or keep it contained. For Hale's family, this was both vindicating and devastating. Private interviews revealed their lingering frustration and grief over decades without answers. His sister, speaking on camera, recounted the last time she had spoken to him. "He called me that night, said he was onto something. I never thought it would end like this. But now, I see he was trying to leave breadcrumbs, not just for me, but for everyone who believed in truth." The legal ramifications were immediate. Once untouchable figures faced subpoenas and inquiries. Internal investigations were launched, not just into Hale's disappearance, but into the structural failures he had identified. Every document he had preserved, every note he had written, became a catalyst for accountability. Then came the public memorial. Though Hale had not been seen since 2005, the community he had fought to protect honored him. A small ceremony outside the county courthouse drew local officials, colleagues, and members of the public. Media coverage highlighted the irony. A man who had vanished for uncovering truth now became a symbol of that very truth. Meanwhile, the dead man's switch finally yielded fruit. Encrypted files, once inaccessible, revealed tangible evidence linking various acts of corruption and procedural negligence to identifiable individuals. Names were matched with documented decisions, financial transfers, and security logs. Investigators could now piece together not only what happened to Hale but why systemic inertia allowed his disappearance to go unchallenged for years. The ripple effects extended beyond Pennsylvania. National oversight committees took notice. Federal inquiries were quietly launched, and policies on prosecutorial conduct began undergoing revisions. In classrooms of law schools, Hale's story became a case study, an unsettling example of how truth can be suppressed and how one individual's foresight can alter the trajectory of justice. Emotionally, the public response was profound. Viewers who had followed the case for years expressed a rare satisfaction. Justice, delayed though it may have been, was finally served. The narrative had come full circle, from mystery, through investigation, to resolution. And yet, even in resolution, questions lingered. What had motivated the orchestrators? What other cases had been quietly affected by the same systemic failings? Investigators noted these as points for further research, ensuring that Hale's efforts would continue to shape accountability long after the cameras stopped rolling. By the end of the day, the story had evolved beyond a simple cold case. It had become a testament to perseverance, to the power of meticulous preparation, and to the idea that even in the face of institutional resistance, one person's dedication could illuminate the darkest corners of the system. Every file, every interview, every hidden clue had a purpose. And today, the community, the family, and the public finally understood that purpose. Hale's legacy was now secure. The missing was no longer missing in spirit. The case, long cold, had thawed into clarity, leaving a blueprint for justice, and a reminder that even decades later, truth could prevail. Silence settled over the courthouse when the final report was released. There was no dramatic press conference. No triumphant speeches. Just documents, signatures, and the quiet acknowledgement that something long buried had finally been brought into the light. 4 years, the disappearance of the district attorney had been treated as an anomaly, an uncomfortable footnote in the state's legal history. But now, it was clear, this was never just about one man vanishing. It was about what he refused to ignore. Investigators concluded that Hale had been methodical to the end. He anticipated disbelief. He anticipated denial. And he anticipated that if anything happened to him, the system would try to move on without him. That is why he documented everything. That is why he hid copies where no single authority could erase them all. Justice did not arrive swiftly. It arrived slowly, deliberately, and with consequence. Several individuals named in Hale's files resigned quietly. Others faced disciplinary action. A handful became subjects of ongoing federal review. No dramatic arrests followed, but something far more significant occurred. The structure that once protected silence was dismantled. For Hale's family, closure came not in answers about his final moments, but in confirmation that his life's work had not been erased. His sister stood before reporters and said something that captured the essence of the case. He didn't disappear. He planted himself in the truth. Across Pennsylvania, prosecutors began adopting new transparency protocols. Case oversight committees were expanded. Whistleblower protections were reinforced. These changes did not carry Hale's name, but they carried his imprint. In law schools, his case became required study, not as a cautionary tale, but as a reminder of responsibility. Students learned that justice is not just about winning cases, but about withstanding pressure when winning becomes inconvenient. And for the public, something rare happened. This cold case did not end in despair. It ended in accountability. Viewers who followed the story were not left with unanswered questions, but with a sense of completion. The mystery had not only been solved, it had meant something. A life had mattered. A voice had been heard. Because that is what Mystery Files is about. Not just crimes. Not just timelines. But people. Every case leaves behind echoes. Every truth waits for its moment. And sometimes, justice doesn't arrive on time, but when it does, it changes everything. Every mystery has a voice. And today, that voice was finally heard.